Good evening, everybody, and I'm Michael Porter, and I'm speaking to you from Harvard Business School today. And I wish I could be there with you because this is one of my favorite meetings of the year. But what I'd like to do is talk to you about really one of the critical topics that CEOs and other business leaders all around the world are thinking about these days. And the general topic is, what's the role of business in advancing society as opposed to doing business? And in particular, at this moment, there's kind of a new focus on this concept of purpose, having a corporate purpose as a sort of unifying theme for how to understand what companies should be doing to make sure that they benefit society. This concept is now very prominent in the U.S. and growing rapidly here. It is starting to be discussed in India, and a few Indian companies have started down this path, but it's not yet begun to gain momentum. And so the purpose of these comments is to sort of give you all a flavor for what is this new idea, where does it fit in the evolution of thinking about this broader topic, and how do we do it well, which is, of course, the most important question. Now, the concept of purpose has been a very useful discussion because it brings more attention to the fact that a company can and should have a positive impact on society. And this is critical today in a time where capitalism is under some attack. Particularly here in America and perhaps elsewhere as well. What many people now are believing is, capitalism is enriching a few without benefiting many. And we in business, we believe we benefit many, but we have not had an effective way of either thinking about that or talking about that or actually delivering on that. The purpose idea is entering an inflection point. It's something where 2 or 3 years ago, it was not a word that was commonly used. Today, it's a very common word. And the reason for that is, probably most due to really two critical things and statements that were introduced into America discussion. But before we get into the details of corporate purpose, let's talk a little bit about why it is that this is so important right now. What is the role of business in society? Does business need to have a role in society? And then from there, the question is, if we're going to do it, if we're going to have that role, how are we going to do it well? And where does purpose fit in? And the other concepts that we have seen come up and come and go in this area. So the basic situation here is well known to all of you. Societies all over the world are facing significant social and environmental and economic opportunity challenges. It's happening everywhere. Even in our country, in the United States, we have really a tremendous set of concerns right now about things like this. Our traditional way of dealing with societal problems is government and NGOs. NGOs were really invented as a new organizational form to deal with societal issues. But what we've come to see is, despite the government and NGOs having the best intentions and doing a lot of great work, they have limited capabilities, limited resources, limited money to take on these challenges because they're huge challenges. And they often involve millions of people. And the ability to address those at scale has been very limited. And if we're actually honest, we find that we're making some progress against these social challenges, but we certainly haven't solved them. And the progress we're making is not fast enough. And this represents the hunger from society of business playing a role. Because business has the capacity, the resources, the capabilities, the ability to scale. And the good news is that we in business have been at this for decades, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think despite the fact that many companies are performing activities like this, we are at a period where we're not doing enough. And we're not helping business and our societies understand how important this is and how to go about it. So I think one of the critical business issues of our time is how should businesses engage in society? How should they engage in social problems? Even though they're still businesses and they make a profit. How do we think about this? So in order to advance that set of ideas, I think we need to review a little bit the history of how this issue of corporate social impact has been evolving. And this has been going on now for a long time, for many decades. Companies have been doing things that are meant to make social impact and address social challenges. Really, the starting point for all of this work was philanthropy, corporate philanthropy. Companies have been involved in corporate philanthropy for many, many decades. The high water mark here in America is Target Corporation, the retailer. Many of you know them. Target made a commitment many, many years ago that they were going to give 5% of their pre-tax profit to, social community causes, and they're still doing it today in the year, 2019. Now, we believe very strongly that philanthropy is good, and we should keep doing it. But what we have to understand about philanthropy is that there are limits to philanthropy. There's only so much you can give. And the big problem with philanthropy is the getting leverage. We can only give so much to so many organizations, and they can only help so many people with what we give. So how does this scale? How do we get real substantial impact? And that reflects the fact that philanthropy is kind of redistribution. It's taking money from people that have it, the corporation, and then giving it to other people who are going to use it to do good things. But as I said earlier, the institutions focused on taking the philanthropy and trying to use it well, have trouble really creating major impact. They have trouble scaling. They have trouble actually dealing with the overwhelming number of problems. And again, you in India know this better than anybody else. There's millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people who need help on all kinds of things. And this model of corporate philanthropy is getting us a little bit down the road, but it's not going to solve these problems. It's not going to be the answer. So I think a number of years ago, we started moving beyond philanthropy. But I think it's also important to realize that even doing philanthropy was, at the time, a big step forward. And that's because of primarily of the greatest single cause of this is the work of economist Milton Friedman. And once he wrote in an article, the social responsibility of a company is to maximize profits. That the goal of a company was shareholder benefit, not social benefit. In fact, he went even further. He said that if companies spend money on social things, that's the misuse of corporate resources. So even getting to corporate philanthropy involved taking on this idea of Milton Friedman's, which was very well entrenched in the investor community and still is in many cases. Many investors believe, we shouldn't be doing this stuff. We just want to maximize shareholder value. Now, partly a result of that criticism is partly the result of the lack of impact that companies started to understand that their philanthropy was having. We went to another stage. So that really the second stage of how companies thought about social impact was the concept of corporate social responsibility. All of you have heard of that. Virtually every company that I know of any scale in the world is doing some of this. What is corporate social responsibility? Well, that says it's more than just giving money. Corporate social responsibility is about how we behave in business, and it usually has a number of characteristics. We have to comply with ethical standards, with community standards. We have to be good citizens. We have to behave sustainably, and we've all been hearing about that for many years. We've got to prove that we're a good company. And so you see enormous proliferation of codes of conduct and certifications that companies are getting to prove that they care and that they're behaving according to community standards. All of you probably are involved in some way in this activity. Again, it's not good. It's not bad. It is good, I should say. Doing these things is good. It was raising the bar on what businesses did. A lot of businesses were not particularly following these rules. The problem with corporate philanthropy is not that it's not a good thing to do. The problem is it the right thing to do, and is it the most powerful thing to do that would make the most social impact? And for most companies doing corporate social responsibility, they're really focusing on reducing the risk or the harm that they're creating rather than actually doing good. And it's about building trust and improving the company's reputation and getting a license to operate. Those have been the critical ideas underpinning this whole CSR movement, which has been going on for some time. So again, like philanthropy, CSR is good. It's a step forward. We should keep doing it. But it, in and of itself, is not going to solve most of the problems that we are talking about. Now, I must say, though, that in India, there is a public policy in the law since the year 2014, which actually requires companies to develop a CSR policy and spend 2% of their profits every year. You're all aware of this. And again, given the history, it was a step forward for India. But I think today what we've learned is this is not enough. I'm not saying you should contribute more to CSR. I'm saying we have to do CSR, we have to do it as well as we can, but we have to realize that that's not going to get us to addressing all those incredible problems that our societies face. And again, India is an extremely challenging country from this perspective. So where have we gone beyond CSR? And the answer is we've gone well beyond CSR in many parts of the world. And the first next step in the history here is the so-called ESG, SRI or GRI reporting. Essentially, what happened was demand was created among investors because the investors' clients wanted some way of directing their money to companies that were good companies, that were behaving, in the right ways and setting the right standards for their activity and their behavior. ESG is environmental, social, and governance. There's a whole set of indicators and standards for are you meeting environmental, social, and governance standards. And the GRI reporting initiative is another set of measures. These are two separate measurement systems, which is GRI and ESG are not the same. Many companies today are working on both. They're reporting both kinds of measures. Now, these measures tend to be quite high level, and they're often self-reported. They're not based on rigorous independent, data in most cases. And they cover many, many areas. So I think the GRI measures, there's probably 30 or more different GRI things you have to comply with. And once again, it was very important that we started to try to measure this stuff rather than just talk about it. And these efforts, I think, were well-intended efforts, and have probably created a lot of positive movement on the part of companies where if they have to measure something, they're doing something about it. That said, these are so diverse and so disparate that it's hard to see these making huge impacts on what companies are actually doing. Yes, they have to meet the ESG standard on this or that, but does that mean they're really moving the needle? And what we find in most cases is, not really, and we found little relationship between these standards and actual corporate performance. So again, a positive step forward on this long journey, but this one, at least from my perspective, is something you need to do. You need to check the boxes that you've measured these things, You send the right message, and you may learn how to improve, but ultimately, this is not going to transform the social impact of business. It's going to help. It's not going to transform. We need to go further. And I think that's where social purpose comes from. There was a vacuum here. People that were very thoughtful here were doing all these things, but at the end of the day, the growing perception has been that what we're doing is not enough and it's not working. We're not changing the world. We're not getting the support and enthusiasm from our citizens for capitalism. What do we do to get to the next level? And that's where the corporate social purpose movement started. And it's fairly recent. It really all got off to the races when there was a letter sent from Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock. BlackRock is a massive financial firm that owns a significant number of shares of virtually every major company, certainly in America and maybe even in the world. And the CEO of BlackRock wrote a letter to all of the CEOs that they owned a share of in 2018 and introduced the idea of purpose. And that was when purpose took off. You can see here, why, what was the logic of Larry's idea. He's trying to focus on license to operate. That sounds a little bit like CSR. But he has a broader view that a sense of purpose will make us longer term, and it will. If we're not longer term, we're going to be vulnerable to activists, and ultimately, unless we can do better, we're not going to be supported by the key stakeholders, including citizens. So, a sense of purpose is critical to achieving the full potential. That was Larry's 2018 letter. Then he wrote a second letter in 2019, which you see summarized on the right-hand side of this slide. And I think this 2019 level was very important because it took a very general idea of purpose and pushed it forward, made it a little bit more specific and a little bit more concrete. So, purpose is not a tagline in a marketing campaign. So it's the fundamental reason for being. Why do we exist? What are we doing? Beyond just creating value for shareholders. It's also not the sole purpose it's not the sole pursuit of profits, but it's the broader purpose and views that we need to actually be profitable. Profits are not inconsistent with purpose. And this is a very important point. Profits and purpose are inextricably linked. That was Larry's letter, and so on. The combination of these two letters got purpose on the racetrack of companies adopting it. We see now many, many purpose statements companies have, and again, that discussion has been a good one. I think it's allowed a lot of management teams to really look hard at, why do we exist? What can we do that really would matter in a substantial way rather than just, doing business as usual? And it's been, I think, a very, very, very helpful idea. Now, let me say very quickly that it's what many of you already know, and that is this is not a new idea, this idea. In fact, Jamsetji Tata, the founder of the Tata Group, was really a pioneer here. In 1904, he died, but before that, he said, in a free enterprise system, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but it is, in fact, the very purpose of its existence. So essentially what he said is the purpose of a company is to address all these stakeholders. And this idea has been developed and nurtured by the Tata Group ever since. So this is not a new idea, but it's an idea that's now been elevated. And that's the good news. The bad news is that, so what exactly is purpose? What's the framework for a good purpose? What does a good purpose look like versus a less effective purpose? And then how do you do it? What's the playbook? We've got a lot of purpose statements out there, and if you read them, a lot of them are going to be very general, very vague, motherhood, very loosely tied to what the company does. They sound good, they feel good, they represent good values, but is it powerful? Not really. So that was kind of where we were after Larry Fink's letters. Recently, in 2019, actually on August 19th, so this is only a month ago, the Business Roundtable issued a statement on corporate social purpose, or the purpose of a corporation. And as many of you know, the Business Roundtable, or BRT, is the most prestigious business group in America. The CEOs of the most, largest and most powerful companies, and they came together to issue this statement. And the basic idea of the statement was that you had to go beyond the sole focus on shareholder value. That had been the mantra for business for so long, that shareholder value, shareholder value, shareholder value. But the Business Roundtable has said, yeah, shareholder value is important. We're going to keep trying to create shareholder value, but it's not enough. And we have to serve all of our other key stakeholders and create value for them as well. And this is a summary of the Business Roundtable statement. So look towards the bottom. It says, we commit to delivering value to our customers. Okay. Investing in our employees. Investing is the key word. Dealing fairly and ethically with our suppliers. We're going to view them as partners, not as somebody to beat up, in terms of getting the price down. We're going to support the communities in which we work, and we're going to have sustainable practices, and we're not going to ignore shareholder value, but that's just one of many. Now, this statement, when it came out, created a lot of controversy, particularly among investors. They weren't so happy about this. They were very, very wary about the idea that shareholder value isn't number one as the goal of a company. But the corporate sector, I think, given all the history I've talked to you about, I think has pushed on anyway, because they realize that we have to re-engineer how we think about, capitalism and how we think about a company and how a company competes if we're going to deal with A, the problems we face in society, but also B, the perception business has in the community and among citizens and among all the other interested parties in business. So the question then, of course, is now, how do we make purpose powerful? We can have a nice purpose statement. It can be inspiring, but how does it matter? How do we make it important? How do we make it something that really moves the needle on something important for society? That's where we are today with purpose. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody uses the word, but the question is, what do we do? How do we do it? How do we do it well? How do we do it the way we need to? And there, I think we have been involved, with Mark Kramer, my colleague, on this topic for quite some time. As you see here, in 2001, we published an article called Creating Shared Value. And the idea of creating shared value is that there's no inconsistency between profit and positive social impact. Those two are not inconsistent. You don't have to have social impact to make, it's just having social impact doesn't reduce your profit. By the way, most people thought historically that profit was inconsistent with social impact. That if you wanted to be more environmentally friendly, then that was going to cost you more money because you had to put more equipment to, deal with your emissions. If you want to have a safe workplace, that costs more money. You have to put more processes in place and so forth. So there's been a deep view, which has actually been strengthened, unfortunately, by economists, of which I'm one, that there is some kind of a trade-off between profit and social impact. But we have come to believe, and in this article we laid out the case for why actually profit is not only not inconsistent, But the most advanced form of capitalism is where we integrate social impact into our core strategy. It's not just a thing on the side, which is the way it's been until today in most companies. Instead, we view the business as itself impacting society in a variety of ways that actually make the business more successful. That's the concept of shared value. And this concept has been bubbling around the world, and one of the prizes in this prize family of prizes is about shared value. We have shared value efforts all over the world now, and probably hundreds and even thousands of companies have taken this course because it provides a comprehensive, rigorous way in which you can think about what social impact could you make that would be the most powerful, because it would be self-sustaining. If you can make a social impact and also make a profit at the same time, you can scale it. If reducing your resource footprint is actually saving you money, which it is, then you can spend all the energy that you can muster to reduce resources. And that benefits society, but it also benefits the company. That's the concept of shared value. Now, the basic idea is that there is no trade-off between business success and social success. In fact, there's a fundamental synergy. And the underlying reason is that when you have societal problems and when you have environmental impacts like dumping in the river or polluting and other environmental impacts, actually these social problems create economic costs for companies. If you're wasting resources, you're wasting money. We also have learned that in the business environment, if you have societal problems, suppose no people are educated, suppose you don't have good, you don't have well-trained workers that you can hire, well, that's actually going to reduce your productivity and your profitability. If the community in which you're operating doesn't have good roads, that's going to reduce your profitability because it's going to mean your infrastructure or your logistical costs are too high. So what we've understood is for many, many years, we've been really shackled by the idea that there's some separation between social success and business success. And we now believe with overwhelming evidence that the two are synergistic, that if we can figure out how to make positive social impact in almost any area, and we do that in a unique and powerful way, we can improve our business results. Not only that, but also make a tremendous impact on society. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of shared value, because it's an idea that I think needs to go much further. And we believe that shared value is the definition of corporate purpose. It's what we should mean when we talk about corporate purpose. Because if we can benefit a societal need in the course of our business, that makes us scalable, it makes us powerful, and it's going to have a huge impact. If we're just giving away money or if we're doing a nice thing, that's not going to ultimately get the same results. So in creating shared value, let me give you some examples and show you some companies, and then I'll conclude. What we've found is that there is a playbook for shared value. And the playbook has three different components. Number one, every company has products and services, and that's your first opportunity to create shared value. You can engineer and develop your products in ways that actually benefit societal needs and social problems. You're a food company. If your food's more nutritious, if it's reaching kids in India that are now malnourished or stunted, that has a huge social impact. But if you can do that with a business model and do that for every kid at a reasonable cost, there we have made a difference. So that's product-based shared value. Your product could be environmentally innovative. It could be innovative in many other ways that would affect social needs and social problems in the society. So that's number one. Number two is you can run your business in a shared value way. And that means that in your value chain, you're really paying new attention that hasn't been paid historically to utilizing resources really well, not having too much packaging, not recycling rather than throwing things away and going to the waste dump, conserving the energy use. A lot of people now conserve energy because they say, oh, I have to do that for climate change. But actually conserving energy is saving money, lots and lots of money. And you can apply this all throughout the value chain, in logistics, in a whole variety of areas. If your employees, if you help your employees become more effective and better trained, that's going to make them more productive. That's going to benefit the company. It's also going to create retention of your employees if you've put that resource in. So what we're learning is there's a whole lot of ways that we can operate and compete in a way that is shared value. And because it's shared value, it will improve our financial results. And this idea is spreading, but there's still many companies that haven't really got on this particular path, and they need to. And then the third part of shared value is actually, it says it's in the interest of the company and its profit to improve the communities and the business environment in which the company operates. It's not somebody else's problem. If you help improve the capability of suppliers, if you support efforts to build the infrastructure in your communities, attract supporting companies that you can work with to your community, all those things are not charity. They're making you more competitive. And that allows you to sustain, attractive returns and grow your business over time. So even though you're investing not in the company, but in outside stuff that's shared, that's still very powerful in driving economic value. What we've come to understand is that we really didn't understand the power of capitalism historically. We saw it too narrowly. We saw it only in terms of profit in the narrow sense of that word. We didn't see it in terms of its incredible leverage in almost all aspects of what a company does. And companies have not taken advantage of that possibility to really move the needle on many social issues. If you're going to create shared value, where do you start? The first thing you got to start is you got to figure out what societal issues does my business touch. And of course, you're going to be affected by the business environment, so everybody touches that or could touch that. But if you're a food company, you have a different set of things to worry about than if you're a machinery company or a company that does environmental remediation. Every business is going to have different touches to society and societal issues. And to have a good shared value strategy, you got to figure out where your touches are. And again, the key rule of shared value is we don't just do good. We do good in ways where we can be uniquely good at doing good because of our business, our capabilities. And if we can do that, we're going to be more competitive. And shared value is fundamentally now a critical part of strategy. It's one of the key ways to differentiate yourself, the key ways to be better than your rivals. So let's look at a few examples here in the few minutes we have. Here's an example of a company called Discovery Health. It's a health insurance and broader insurance company. It's based in South Africa, and it's become one of the leading insurance companies in the world. It's extremely profitable. It's growing very rapidly. And basically, the core to their whole success story, and their CEO will tell you this anytime you ask him, is shared value. Now, they have a corporate purpose, and you see that on the slide. Their corporate purpose is to make people healthier and enhance and protect their lives. Okay? That is a very motivating statement. It's something I think we would all say would be a good thing for the world. The challenge, of course, though, is not having a great aspiration. The challenge is actually turning that into a strategy that actually allows you to do that at a profit, which then allows you to actually achieve the vision and the purpose and actually make a difference. To do this, Vitality had an innovation. No insurance company in the world had ever done this before. They figured out that actually there's no conflict between helping our customers be healthier and running a terrific insurance business in health insurance. And the way they did that was they created a paired strategy where they had their insurance product, but they also had a wellness incentive program called Vitality, where they used a lot of behavioral health thinking to create incentives for their customers, their insurance customers, to actually behave in a healthier way. And they got, various kinds of incentives in terms of food and fitness and all kinds of other things. They got points, Vitality points, if they did healthy stuff. And what they discovered was that if the Vitality if Vitality worked, that is, they could prove that health did improve among their members that were active in Vitality, and there's very documented data on that is now above reproach. But they also had the insight that if they could have their members healthy, they wouldn't have to spend as much money, and they could take that and use that money to price their coverage lower. So Vitality is able to lower the prices for those consumers who are actively involved in Vitality, but they're also able to take advantage of the overall strategy to kind of be even the lower price player up front, even before the positive benefits of Vitality. And this has allowed them to be just remarkably successful. See, what is the typical insurance model? It's an underwriting model. You look at a customer, you ask them to have a doctor's exam, and then based on your judgment of how healthy they are, you price the insurance. Well, and that sort of has no impact on health. But Vitality's model is completely different. Their whole model is to actually motivate our employees to actually be healthier, and they realize that if our members are healthier, we will do better. That's shared value. Here's an example you all know, Mahindra and Mahindra. You may all have heard all this already. I've just been learning about this. They're bound by a purpose which they call to rise. We made humanity's innate desire to rise our driving purpose. And that's why we exist, and we work every day to do it. But to make a purpose powerful, you've got to translate it into actual behavior in the business itself. And you see on the bottom the three pillars of Mahindra's purpose. Challenging conventional thinking in everything we do to try to be more innovative and more competitive. Innovative use of resources, the same point I made earlier. Enabling all our stakeholders to be better. If our suppliers are better, we'll be better. So here's a leading Indian company that has already been on this path for some time. And there needs to be more, though. And I know there will be more. Finally, I want to show you a little bit about Walmart. This slide is very hard to read, but this presentation is going to be available to all of you. I encourage you to take a look at this. Walmart was a company in America that was not respected. They were criticized for a lot of reasons. They were too powerful. They didn't pay their employees enough. Walmart was kind of the whipping boy for large corporations in America. But they saw a new way forward. And they saw a new way forward based on shared value, which they talk about in their annual report. And you can see that they are now actively pursuing all three levels of shared value. Products, value chain, and the local business environment. I won't go through all the steps they're taking, but they are really innovative in using their products to make more societal impact in addition to profit, using resources better, saving electricity, all those things. They are a real leader. They're a particular leader in employee health. They've taken many steps to make their employees healthier and their families healthier, and that's having tremendous cost savings and also productivity advantages. So Walmart, I think, is quite an inspiring example of shared value. Now, what some of you may know already, but many of you probably don't know, is a couple of years ago, working with Fortune magazine, Mark Kramer and I helped spawn a new list. Fortune is the magazine of lists. You know, the Fortune 500 is the most famous list. But there's now something called the Fortune Change the World list. And these are companies that do well by doing good. That's a simple way of saying that are creating shared value. They're doing something important. It's making a big impact, but it's helping and benefiting and enhancing their profitability and their success. And this is the list for 2019. It's terrific to see an Indian company on that list. Narayana, all of you know, number 33 on the list. On last year's list, Mahindra was number 23, another Indian company. What I'd like to see is that we need a lot of Indian companies every year on the list. And that is going to be a reflection that we've gone beyond CSR. We're thinking very deeply about the impact we can have in business, and that we've started understanding that that's not by getting away from business and being nice or charitable. It's about really doubling down and innovating within our business with these new ideas. What is the purpose of business? Well, we believe the way to define purpose is the purpose of business is to create economic value in a way that also creates shared value for society. We think that our most powerful role in business is to act as a business, not as a charitable giver. And if we act as a business and think about it using the shared value concept, this is our most powerful tool to address many of society's pressing issues. And we in business can have a tremendous impact. What we'd like to see is more and more companies moving in this direction. And I believe that, you know, in a reasonable amount of time, we can really transform the whole image business has in society and do a tremendous amount of good for everybody, the average citizen, our neighbors, our society. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that this will motivate all of you in this room to step up whatever you're doing, to have social impact. And I wish you a very, very successful meeting. And again, very sorry that I'm not there with you. Thank you.